I'm not suggesting Queen Camilla lacks authority, but that tiara isn't hers. It rightfully belongs to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, for the Christmas gala at Buckingham,
No one expected Princess Anne to say a single word. She didn't have to. As Camilla made one desperate final attempt to block Catherine from entering the throne room, Anne's silent response ended the battle instantly. Seconds later, she took Catherine's hand and walked her forward, triggering a royal moment that insiders claim changed the monarchy forever. But what happened behind those doors left even senior royals stunned. Before we uncover the truth, make sure to subscribe so you never miss our latest royal updates. Camilla stepped closer, fighting to stay composed. She pleaded for one last delay, warning that allowing Catherine inside would look less like preparation and more like replacing her. Catherine stayed silent, clearly uncomfortable, knowing every passing second pulled her deeper into a conflict she had never wanted. Anne never wavered. She told the Queen Consort that fear, influence, and personal feelings no longer mattered. The decision had already been approved by a confidential royal council made up of trusted senior royals and advisors. Catherine was being granted access because her future role beside William now required knowledge once reserved only for the king and his closest circle. Everything changed with one detail. King Charles had personally signed the order. That single signature gave Catherine immediate access to constitutional plans, royal ceremonies, and emergency procedures used during times of crisis, illness, or transition. For Camilla, the hardest blow was knowing Charles had approved it without giving her any power to stop it. Catherine looked toward Anne, who quietly handed her a scarlet folder containing the official order. But Camilla sensed there was another page she had not seen, and the fear of what it might contain was even stronger than the rejection she had already faced. As Anne walked ahead, the corridor fell completely silent. Catherine followed, carrying the weight of responsibility rather than any feeling of triumph. Camilla remained behind, realizing this had never been a last-minute decision. Every step had been prepared, every detail arranged, and Anne had been chosen to carry it through. But to understand why Anne stood with Catherine instead of Camilla, we first have to uncover the fears, loyalties, and old wounds each woman carried. Behind the royal titles and palace traditions stood three women, each facing a very different future. Camilla feared losing the influence she had spent decades trying to secure. Catherine feared something very different. She never wanted to become the symbol of another woman's loss. Anne, however, faced the hardest decision of all. She had to choose between protecting family harmony or protecting the future of the crown. In the end, duty came first. Anne had never cared about praise. For years, she had put service ahead of personal comfort. She believed the monarchy was bigger than any one royal. In her view, even private jealousy could weaken public trust and damage the future William would one day inherit. Catherine carried a different burden. After years of loyal public service, she was finally preparing for a greater role. But as her responsibilities grew, so did Camilla's concerns. In a private conversation with William, Catherine admitted she never wanted another woman to be embarrassed because of her. Even so, she could not step away from duties that affected her family and the future of the monarchy. Behind closed doors, Camilla finally spoke honestly with Charles. She admitted that every time Catherine entered a room, she felt her own importance fading. Nothing had been taken from her officially, but the attention was clearly shifting. Advisors focused more on Catherine, and Camilla felt the future arriving sooner than she was ready to accept. Charles understood her fears, but he also recognized the risk. He tried to comfort her, yet he refused to slow Catherine's preparation. That quiet decision left Camilla feeling exposed, pushing her toward a choice she would later regret. Anne had already noticed the warning signs. She privately recorded moments where personal tensions appeared to delay official duties, including postponed briefings and efforts to limit Catherine's access. The pattern was becoming harder to ignore. Then William learned one final detail. A confidential note revealed that Camilla had asked for the throne room briefing to be delayed. At that moment, he realized this was no longer about insecurity. It had become interference. For Anne, that was the breaking point. The final clash had actually begun weeks earlier during preparations for a major royal ceremony. One quiet change placed Catherine behind Camilla, separated her from William, and removed her from a role Charles had personally assigned. After witnessing it, and began preparing for a confrontation. When Catherine arrived for the Commonwealth Service rehearsal, she expected to stand beside William and receive a private briefing from senior palace officials. At an event where every position and every step carried meaning, even the smallest change could send a powerful message. Every position carried meaning. It showed status, authority, and who had earned the king's confidence. Just minutes before the rehearsal began, an aide arrived with a revised placement card. Catherine was quietly moved several places back, and her private briefing was handed to another royal after instructions approved through Camilla's office. The change reached far beyond one ceremony. It pushed Catherine away from William, reduced her public role, and suggested that even duties assigned by Charles could be quietly changed. Catherine never complained. She stayed calm, folded the original placement card, and slipped it into her handbag. Watching that small moment, Anne understood the true cost of Catherine's silence. This was no longer about royal tradition. It was about personal fear affecting official decisions. Anne immediately asked who had approved the change. The answer came with hesitation. The order had passed through Camilla's office under the label of visual hierarchy, the system used to decide royal positions during public events. But Charles had never approved it that evening. Charles quietly compared both placement cards. As he looked at the original and the replacement, he realized someone inside his own household had overruled his decision without permission. Anne then ordered a confidential review of every change made to Catherine's duties over the previous 6 months. The investigation examined private schedules, approvals, and internal messages. What it uncovered was impossible to ignore. This was not one mistake. It was a pattern. Briefings had been delayed, assignments changed, messages redirected, and Catherine's access repeatedly limited. Armed with the evidence, Anne requested a private meeting with Camilla. Once the doors closed, there were no advisors or staff left to ease the tension. She placed the documents on the table and asked one direct question. How many times had Camilla interfered with Catherine's duties without the king's knowledge? Camilla tried to defend herself, but Anne never moved. She listened in silence, refusing to let excuses change the facts. For the first time, the palace's polite masks disappeared. A confidential review had revealed the same pattern again and again. Catherine's briefings were delayed, her ceremonial role was changed, and important messages were redirected. Anne called the meeting to discover who had approved every decision. The findings were impossible to dismiss. This was not confusion or bad timing, it was a deliberate pattern. Charles believed his orders were being followed, but someone had repeatedly slowed Catherine's preparation for her future role. Camilla pushed the documents aside and defended her actions. She insisted she was protecting stability around the king. In her view, Catherine's rise was happening too quickly while Charles still carried the weight of the crown. She warned that too much attention on the future queen could weaken the king's authority. Anne was not convinced. She calmly reminded Camilla that protecting Charles did not mean blocking the duties he had personally approved or making another woman pay the price. Anne had nothing to gain from the confrontation. She was never in line to become queen. Her only concern was protecting the institution she had served her entire life. At last, the pressure became too much. Camilla admitted she had asked for the throne room briefing to be delayed. The meeting would have given Catherine access to a confidential continuity plan, explaining the responsibilities she might one day need to carry if the king became unable to perform his duties. Anne let the silence settle before revealing the truth. Charles already knew about the request. He had rejected it himself and ordered Anne to make sure Catherine entered the throne room without delay. From that moment on, no private appeal or emotional argument could change the decision. Camilla slowly stood and offered one final warning. She said Anne might control the doorway, but she did not control everything. Inside the scarlet folder was one final page, carrying the signature neither of them could ignore. It belonged to King Charles. He had read the document several times before making his decision. This was never about choosing one woman over another. It was about protecting the monarchy's future if illness, absence, or a national crisis ever threatened its stability. Charles understood the personal cost. By approving the order, he forced Camilla to face a future she feared, while ensuring Catherine was prepared for the responsibilities she would one day share with William. The directive did not make Catherine queen. It simply prepared her for the role that awaited her. William entered quietly, choosing his words with care. He told his father that Catherine had never tried to replace Camilla or take her place. But he also made one thing clear. Without the right knowledge, Catherine could never fully support the monarchy. Preparing for the future had to begin long before a crisis arrived. Charles looked down at the document, feeling the weight of both women. If he signed it, Camilla would see it as rejection. If he refused, Catherine would learn that fear had been allowed to stand in the way of duty. Finally, the king picked up his pen. His signature approved Catherine's immediate briefing. But another order carried even greater importance. It gave Anne full authority to make sure the meeting happened without delay. No private office, emotional appeal, or last-minute request could stop it. There was one more instruction. From that moment on, no one could change Catherine's schedule, ceremonial role, or access to senior advisors without Charles's personal approval. It was more than a simple rule. It closed the quiet path that had allowed interference behind palace doors. As Charles set the pen down, William understood everything had changed. His father had finally chosen action over silence. Yet, the decision brought no celebration. Catherine would soon learn she had been quietly protected, while Camilla would discover how fragile influence inside the royal family could be. Later, an attendant delivered a copy of the directive to Camilla as she sat alone with an untouched cup of tea. She read the final page twice before removing her glasses and asking one question. Did Charles really approve all of this? The answer came softly. He had. In that instant, the throne room doors became more than an entrance. They marked the line between the authority Camilla once held and the power she could no longer use. The order immediately ended her ability to alter Catherine's duties, ceremonial position, or access to key royal advisors. Palace staff also received new instructions. Any future concern involving Catherine had to go directly to Charles, William, or Anne. Private messages from Camilla's office could no longer override the king's decisions. At first, Camilla saw the order as betrayal, not discipline. She couldn't understand why Charles had trusted Anne to carry it out, instead of speaking to her first. After years spent fighting for acceptance beside the king, she believed he had chosen official procedure and silence over standing by her side. Charles never tried to excuse the delay. In a private record of their conversation, he admitted he had avoided the issue because he feared reopening old wounds. But his hesitation had come at a cost. It damaged trust, fueled resentment, and placed the family's future at risk. Then Camilla learned the one detail that shook her most. Catherine had privately asked that no public announcement be made during the review. She also requested that the changes focus on responsibility instead of blame, protecting Camilla's public image and charitable work. That act of mercy hit harder than any punishment. Camilla realized the woman she had seen as a rival had chosen not to embarrass her. Catherine had every chance to damage her reputation, yet she refused. Even after the official dispute ended, the personal pain remained. This time, there were no palace rules, no advisors, and no members of the royal family standing between them. It was simply one woman facing another. Catherine entered the room alone. Camilla stood by the window, expecting a victory speech. Instead, Catherine placed the revised Westminster placement card on the table. She said she had kept it, not as proof of humiliation, but as a reminder of the kind of future queen she never wanted to become. After the throne room briefing, Catherine fully understood the responsibility Charles had entrusted to her. She knew that preparing for the future should never come at the cost of another person's dignity. Camilla looked at the card before quietly admitting the truth. Every step Catherine took toward greater responsibility had made her feel as though she was slowly disappearing. After fighting for years to become queen consort, she had mistaken Catherine's preparation for a threat to her own place. Catherine answered calmly. She told Camilla that no one could protect their own dignity by taking someone else's away. She would accept the duties given to her, but she would never use them as a weapon. Then Catherine revealed another decision. She had asked Charles to let Camilla continue her public duties and charitable patronages. Although mistakes had been made, Catherine refused to erase the years of genuine service Camilla had given. For the first time, Camilla stopped making excuses. She admitted that she had personally approved the Westminster change. She did not blame palace protocol or shift responsibility onto anyone else. In a private record, Camilla admitted the truth. She accepted that her fear had crossed the line and become an abuse of her position. Without making excuses, she offered a sincere apology. For the first time, she did not ask to be protected from the consequences. Catherine did not offer instant forgiveness. Instead, she set clear boundaries. Respect would remain. Duty would continue. But interference would never be accepted again. Realizing Catherine had not come to defeat her, Camilla quietly agreed. Their private understanding brought relief, but it could not stay hidden for long. Soon, a single photograph, a headline, and one public appearance outside Buckingham Palace would shape how the world viewed everything that had happened. By the next morning, the story had reached beyond the palace walls. One image showed Camilla standing still beneath an archway while Princess Anne walked beside Catherine toward the throne room. Without a single word, the photograph told its own story. Many saw a monarchy preparing for the future while trying to respect its past. The palace then confirmed that Catherine had received an expanded continuity briefing, preparing her for greater responsibilities if the monarchy ever faced illness, absence, or an unexpected crisis. The statement also confirmed that Camilla would continue her public duties and charitable work. Nothing had changed in the line of succession, but Catherine's preparation for the future had officially moved forward. When Camilla first saw the newspaper photo, she felt left behind. But after looking closer, she noticed something important. Catherine had never celebrated the moment. She had not looked back or acted with triumph. Anne also avoided the spotlight. In a private conversation with a senior aide, she admitted that the public never saw the months of warnings, difficult conversations, and failed attempts that had led to that decision. People only saw the final walk, not everything that came before it. Public reaction grew even stronger when a national broadcaster declared that Princess Anne had drawn a line inside the House of Windsor. Overnight, Anne was no longer seen as a silent escort. She had become the woman who ended a private struggle. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered with newspapers and handmade signs. One message stood above the rest: strength without retaliation. It captured exactly what many people believed. Catherine had moved forward without trying to destroy Camilla. William knew one photograph could never tell the whole story. Charles quietly followed the headlines, knowing the real test was still ahead. Anne had protected the crown. Catherine had shown restraint. Camilla had paid the price for her fear. But only time would decide what this moment truly meant for the royal family. The future of the monarchy would not be decided by who won. It would be decided by what each person was willing to sacrifice. When the palace doors opened once again, there was no declaration of victory. Catherine had not defeated Camilla, and Anne had not taken control of the royal family. The truth was far more important. Anne had stopped fear from shaping the crown's future. Catherine had accepted greater responsibility without seeking revenge. Camilla had lost the power to interfere, but she had not lost her dignity. And Charles had finally chosen leadership instead of silence. Catherine left the throne room carrying responsibility, not triumph. She had been fully prepared for the duties she might one day face during illness, absence, or a national emergency. The monarchy could no longer afford uncertainty. And William now had a stronger partner beside him for the future. Camilla continued serving the public and supporting her charities. But one boundary was now clear. She could no longer influence Catherine's schedule, official duties, or access to important constitutional briefings. Charles later met with both women and admitted that his silence had allowed distrust to grow. He believed avoiding conflict would protect the family, but in the end, delaying action had caused even greater damage. Anne then spoke privately to Catherine. She explained that leading her into the throne room had never been about ambition. It was about making sure the person expected to carry future responsibility was properly prepared. She had chosen duty over fear. The scarlet folder was eventually sealed inside the royal archives. But its real impact reached far beyond those pages. From that day forward, everyone inside the palace understood that personal rivalry could never come before the future of the monarchy. In one final private meeting, Camilla returned the revised Westminster placement card to Catherine. She admitted it represented the bitterness she was finally ready to leave behind. Anne had drawn the line. Camilla had accepted it. And Catherine stepped forward not as a conqueror, but as a future queen guided by duty, restraint, and the trust of those who had placed the crown above themselves. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.